Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Waso and Chairman Bell. My name's Annette Williams, and I'm representing the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency Division of Taxi and Accessible Services. And I'm here today on behalf of Kate Toren, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, who's the Director of Taxi and Accessible Services. But I myself have, since 1990, been the Manager of Accessible Services at MTA and have worked with the taxi industry to provide approximately 350,000 paratransit trips per year on taxis, as well as to start an accessible taxi option with the taxi industry approximately 20 years ago to provide both paratransit accessible services as well as accessible taxi services to the general public wheelchair user and others who use that service. And I'm chair of the Transportation Research Board's Paratransit Taxi Committee. So vis-a-vis TNCs, in terms of MTA's major concerns, is making sure that any services that are offered by TNCs are in alignment with local and state goals and policies. For instance, San Francisco is responsible for conducting congestion management activities, including monitoring traffic congestion and adopting plans to mitigate congestion. We also are responsible for road safety policy, and we have a Vision Zero San Francisco, which has the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities by the year 2024. Also, the city and county agency were responsible for overseeing public safety, which has been mentioned many times by the other speakers. The state also has major initiatives such as the climate change initiative, including ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions through coordinated transportation and land use planning. And Caltrans Strategic Management Plan released last year set forth a number of mode share goals, such as including a goal of tripling bicycle mode share, doubling walking mode share, and doubling the transit mode share by 2020. And SFMTA has similar goals. In some circumstances, the proliferation of TNCs run contrary to these local, state, and policy goals under this current regulatory scheme. SFMTA is concerned with the patchwork of regulations, this has been mentioned many times, governing TNCs, TCPs, and taxis, which are all similar services but have different regulatory environments. And we want to make sure that services are operating in ways that are consistent with the goals related to the environment, equity, disabled access, and safety. I feel like I'm repeating some of what you got in the beginning, but the CPUC regulations related to TNCs, they're currently, as you can see, a little bit thin in terms of their ability to enforce the regulations. And we'd like to see the state either provide additional resources to the PUC for enforcing regulations or delegate this enforcement to local entities similar to with taxi services. As a starting point for discussions, we've identified a number of ways in which regulations or enforcement may help local authorities better align the TNC services with these local and state policies. One would be some local control on the number of TNC vehicles. It's something you mentioned earlier in terms of having some parameters for the number of vehicles that are on the street so that we can meet our goals for road safety, traffic congestion, and the environment. Also, as you know, very important to me is the stronger requirement relating to disability access. It's important that we have follow-up enforcement with TNCs to provide comparable wheelchair accessible services, and or one of the other things that we've talked about is a requirement for TNCs to pay potentially a per trip surcharge on all trips, which could be deposited into an accessible transportation fund that could then help to assure that on-demand services with short wait times are available to wheelchair users, because ultimately that's what we want to have is services that are available to wheelchair users similar to services that are available to people who use sedans. In San Francisco, that could be, for instance, that fund could be used to augment our accessible taxi services by providing subsidies for purchasing and maintaining these accessible vehicles, or providing per trip incentives to drivers for picking up general public wheelchair trips. Another thing that's important is driver training and licensing, including a DOJ live scan, fingerprint, we've talked about that some. Drug and alcohol testing would help as well to assure public safety. Also, data sharing requirements. It's very difficult to plan without having good data and knowledge of what's happening on the streets, both for the staff and for policymakers who are making, to make smart and informed decisions. Increased enforcement, I think that's been mentioned. We believe that authorization of local entities to conduct enforcement could make a difference. For instance, under the current system, right now, if a rider has a complaint or comes to us with a complaint about the TNC, we can only refer them to the TNC company, and there's no ability to then follow up in terms of disciplinary action or anything to that effect. So we don't have ability to follow up on the outcome of the complaint, nor do we have information about the driver for our tracking purposes, which runs contrary to, public policy goals or public safety goals. Furthermore, the city has limited resources to conduct enforcement related to problematic on-street behavior such as illegal U-turns, stopping mid-block, blocking bus zones, double parking, those kinds of things that we now have more vehicles on the street that are potentially doing that. And finally, a requirement that TNC vehicles display trade dress would make it easier for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other drivers to identify TNC vehicles and anticipate the on-street behavior, such as short stops to load and unload passengers, and a requirement that the TNC's drivers display their business tax certificate would address our goal of treating all businesses that operate in San Francisco equitably. So in closing, I'd like to reiterate that SFMTA's major concern is making sure that the services offered by the TNCs are in alignment with existing local and state policies and goals, including the goal of reducing traffic congestion, greenhouse gas emissions by increasing walking, bicycling, and transit use and shifting people away from the private automobile. The goal of making the transportation system accessible for persons with disabilities, and the goal of protecting public safety. And I can answer any questions that you might have, or if I'm not able to answer them, I can follow up with my colleagues and get back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Lockhart.
Hi, I'm Bob Lockhart. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations at Moneta San Jose International Airport, and representing both the airport and some of the city's views on this topic, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak before you this afternoon. I have provided you a copy of my presentation as well as a copy of a letter that we've sent to Commissioner Randolph regarding our feelings on some of these things, and instead of reading my whole presentation, I'll paraphrase a little for you, as I know it's getting late. We have for many, many years dealt with the taxi industry and the TNC industry and the other ground transportation industries, and much debate, much confusion, much discussion has gone on, generally with little consensus between the industries or within themselves. Our airport is a department of the City of San Jose. Most recently, the City of San Jose approved the issuance of ground transportation permits at the airport to TNCs. Wings came on board in November, just before Thanksgiving, and then Lyft and Uber in the middle of December. Though we have a very short time period with them, we have seen a dramatic increase in the amount of their authorized use at the airport. In fact, our preliminary results show that TNCs in January made over 25,800 passenger pickups at our airport, which is slightly higher than the taxi industry for that month. As we move towards getting our geofence fully operational over the next few weeks, we will be able to confirm those trip data more efficiently and effectively and be able to compare with industries very well. As we look at all the policies and the procedures and directives that regulate the TNCs and other ground transportation industries, one of the ones that is very important to us is driver background checks. We believe that how they are done must be done equally among all industries, and that verification that the driver applicant applying to the company is who they represent themselves to be is very important. And for that reason, we believe a biometric is necessary, whether it be a fingerprinting or some other type of biometrics to be used in the process. And we recommend that that become part of the regulations as we move forward. However, even at our level in the cities, trying to level that playing field, we've actually taken the option and the action to allow the taxicab industries to step back to what we require our TNCs at the airport. Rather than continuing to require fingerprinting, they can use the option to use their own background processes with monthly audits to us. We gave them that option to try to level that playing field. However, many of the companies have recognized the safety and the need for fingerprinting and have decided to stay with the fingerprinting processes. Safety inspection of vehicles is another important part and current concern of ours. And as the commissioner mentioned, we believe it's important to have licensed mechanics and technicians involved with the process of inspecting those vehicles. So we highly recommend the use of independent third-party state licensed mechanics or technicians for all vehicle inspections for all CPUC vehicles. While safety and security at the airport and with our city are extremely important, unfortunately, only the taxicab industry, beyond the taxicab industry, the permits that we issue are only valid for the 1,000 acres of the 180 square miles of San Jose. Everything else is regulated by the CPUC, and we have very little control or input on. So it's important as we look at those things that we try to regulate our policies and procedures as best as possible. Sometimes we have to step back our own policies to meet the CPUC's policies, and we have done that in effect also with our fare structures to allow the taxicab companies, if they have an app similar to a TNC, to allow them to take off the regulations that we have placed in place for fees and fares and allow them to set their own fees and fares with our fares as a maximum. So sometimes we have to step back and do those things to try to be consistent and level that playing field as best as possible. It is important to level the playing field as best as possible so that the passengers, they have access to passengers, can generate revenues and bear similar expenses and regulatory obligations. But on the other hand, no one should have a decisive competitive advantage, nor conversely be systematically eliminated from that competition. Nor should the regulatory agencies be restricted by old policies, processes, and perspectives. We must resolve to ensure that regardless of the transportation mode, the safety and security of the passengers and drivers are the first priorities, and that the industries are regulated in a way that is consistent and effective, while not being unduly burdensome or overly restrictive. Again, I thank you for allowing us to speak.
Thank you. One last question, because it was brought up on the permits. They're charging a per trip fee in San Francisco, and San Jose does a permit fee. And at the PUC, the TCP licenses pay, I think it's $2,000 a year per vehicle, permit fee?
I think that's right.
Are you planning to charge a permit fee to the TNCs?
The TNCs do pay a fee when they initially register with the commission, yes.
What is that based on? Per vehicle, per employee, per business?
Right now, I actually don't know off the top of my head, but right now I believe it's an annual flat fee.
And does it allow unlimited vehicles under that fee?
Right, it is not based on the number of registered drivers that they have.
I would encourage you to do based on drivers, because that at least will allow you to invest in regulating the amount of vehicles on the road. The more that are on the road, the more you will need to regulate. At least come up with a fee that's based on the number of vehicles on the road. That seems fair to me, and that's how you do everything else for every other service that you provide. It's not based on a company, but rather the amount of buses they have or the amount of vehicles they have. But anyway, did you want to? Yeah.
Your colleague from SFO indicated that, well, flights have only increased, I think you said 6%. She's seen a big increase of people using TNCs and not driving their car and parking and long-term parking or short-term parking, whether they park. Do you have any data at Mineta Airport about this possible trend, or?
It's still very early. We just are starting to get the TNC data in. For the month of January, we had a 8% increase in parking. So it did not negatively affect our parking, even though we had such a high increase in the TNCs. The taxis were down about 1,100 trips. But if the taxis are down 1,100 trips and the TNCs are up 25,000 trips, then that means that we're building the business for everyone, not necessarily for just eliminating business from other parties.
Okay, and then on the maintenance, because I step back, we're doing this for the consumer, right? We're requiring a 19-point or whatever it is because we want consumers to get in a cab or get in the TNC so they're protected. Has there been a lot of incidents of the TNC's vehicles breaking down either at the airport or just in general? I mean, I'm just wondering, I mean, we want to protect the public and make sure people maintain their cars, but I assume that even cab drivers want to make sure that their vehicle is clean and operating, and that's their business.
Right.
And I guess you want to regulate in this area, and it seems good from one point of view, but was there any data during the promulgation of this second phase, or from, you fine people $1 million, but have they, are they serious vehicle safety issues, or is it just they don't meet some 119 points, whatever that is?
Well, from our perspective, we view it as a preventative measure. We have not, we don't have data indicating that there is a higher incidence of mechanical issues or accidents caused by equipment failure, but we understand that it's important to ensure that the vehicles on the road are safe, and that's why we added or we are proposing to add the additional layer of a professional inspection rather than simply the company.
And if I could just chime in, currently, they don't even know the number of these vehicles on the road, so you can't really possibly know the performance of these vehicles on the road as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in this area.
What's
I mean,
that? Did we?
I was just going to say, I think we would know from the complaints or other issues that happen. And I don't know about SFO, but we have not seen any kind of evidence where they're out of line in any way with any other ground transportation
In San Jose?
in San Jose.
In San Francisco, we conduct annual, what we call ground transportation inspections of the industry in general, at least once a year for every mode.
Even the TNCs?
And the TNCs
Okay.
were included in our last one. So anybody who comes to property with a trade dress or they've got their app on, we know they were pulled over and their vehicle was inspected. CPUC participates in that, the DMV does, weights and measures when we do the taxis. There are multiple agencies that come out with us, and we do that annually.
So you have that safeguard within San Francisco, but that's not provided statewide?
No, and that's the part of, we are comfortable with our enforcement for our customers at our airports, but we do believe it needs to be expanded to local law enforcement, the PD. We have San Francisco police at the airport that sometimes have a problem with that.
no, thank you. Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next panel. These are the sector representatives. Joseph Okpaku, the Vice President of Government Relations for Lyft. Kelly Blossom, the California Public Policy Manager for Uber. William Rouse, I think, is represented by Marco Soto today. William is the President of the Taxicab Paratransit Association of California. He's represented by Marco Soto. Kevin Illingworth, the President of Greater California Livery Association, and Jim Gleich, the Senior Vice President for Western Region, Transdev On Demand, Inc. And if we can ask the presenters, because we're running pretty late, as we still have a sizable amount of public comment, if you can probably limit your comments to 5 minutes each. Thank you. And we'll begin with Joseph Okpaku. Did I pronounce that right?
You did, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Hueso and the other distinguished members of the committees, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Okpaku, and I am the Vice President of Government Relations for Lyft. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to participate in today's hearing and to answer any questions that you might have. Here's what we know about Lyft today. The Lyft community in California is strong and growing every single day. Since launching in 2012, Lyft has connected millions of Californians with safe rides in nearly 70 cities across our great state, and thousands of your constituents have applied and qualified to drive on the platform. Lyft is a proven economic catalyst. Having access to this new transportation option makes it easier for late-night shift workers to get home safely and for city residents to easily reach local restaurants and cultural events. An independent analysis has found that Lyft enabled consumers to spend an additional $175 million in local California communities in 2014 alone. Lyft and carpooling options like Lyft Line are helping California cut traffic congestion and reduce reliance on car ownership, offering a powerful new tool for the state to work towards its climate and transportation goals. Already, 1 in 4 passengers use Lyft to connect to public transit, helping solve the last mile challenge. And Lyft makes our roads safer. 84% of passengers have indicated that they are more likely to avoid driving while impaired because of Lyft. What's truly exciting is that even though we're only 4 years in, we are just getting started on accomplishing our vision of filling the 80% of empty seats on the road. As we know, Lyft is regulated and permitted by the California Public Utilities Commission, and in December of 2012, the Commission started the rulemaking process that governs the day-to-day operations of TNC companies such as Lyft. Their process of governing TNCs in California continues to this day. 4 years ago, the Commission recognized the distinct nature of transportation network companies and began work to create a separate category of unified and uniform regulation for this new industry that would provide a consistent experience for consumers and operators across the state. And in 2013, the Commission established a comprehensive regulatory framework that includes requirements governing everything from background checks to vehicle inspections to data reporting and driver qualification requirements. Based on the example set in California, 29 other states have followed California's lead and adopted similar statewide regulations for TNCs based on the regulatory model that was carefully and thoughtfully set forth by the Commission here in California. Lyft has been and continues to be committed to working with the CPUC as our community of drivers and passengers continues to grow and evolve. We thank the members of this body who are working to help us achieve the true promise of Lyft in a smart and sustainable way. The Commission's recognition of the distinction between TNCs and other transportation providers has allowed Lyft to work towards its long-term aspiration of mainstreaming carpooling. In 2014, this aspiration took a big step forward when we launched Lyft Line. Lyft Line coordinates carpools by matching multiple passengers heading in the same direction, allowing them to share a ride in a single vehicle. And in the Bay Area, over half of Lyft passengers choose Lyft Line. This means that two people who are getting off at the same train station and heading in the same direction to work, but are traveling separately, can now use Lyft to share and split the cost of a ride. In fact, over 30% of matched Lyft Line rides in San Francisco are now triple matches, showing the tremendous potential of Lyft Line to increase vehicle occupancy as it achieves scale. Lyft complements public transportation as a first and last mile solution, connecting passengers with fixed transit routes without the need for costly parking investments. For that reason, transit systems like Caltrain and LA Metro are increasingly reaching out to partner with Lyft to improve transit access for the public. Lyft is also proactively collaborating with municipal transportation, regional planning, and public transit agencies to plan for the future of transportation. We have voluntarily provided the Southern California Association of Governments, the San Mateo County Transit District, and the San Francisco County Transportation Authority with Lyft utilization data to help inform their planning decisions. Lyft also recently applied to be an official 511 ride matching partner of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in the Bay Area. The key to making our vision a reality and in helping California realize many of its own stated environmental and congestion mitigation goals is mass participation on the platform. The ease of accessing our platform is what allows the aspiring actor in Los Angeles to make ends meet in between auditions. It's what allows a grandmother in San Diego to raise enough money to take her grandkids to Disneyland. And it's what allows teachers to supplement their income during summer break. And what allows a commuter in Long Beach to get an affordable shared Lyft Line ride to a metro station on the way to work. I want to thank you for your inquiry and for helping Lyft deliver on the promise of increasing carpooling in California, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you. How many vehicles do you have on the road?
I don't know the exact number. It's definitely, we have thousands of approved drivers.
What's your capacity working for Lyft again? You're the
VP of Government Relations.
Vice President of Government Relations, okay. You don't know how many vehicles you have?
I can safely say that there are thousands of vehicles on the road. I don't know the
10,000?
At any given time as possible.
20,000?
I don't know that exactly.
You don't know how many vehicles are on the road of your own company?
I don't know exactly how many vehicles are on the road in the state of California at any given particular time. The usage of the Lyft platform can vary based on weather.
Do you know how high it can get? What's the highest you've ever had? And the lowest?
Well, the lowest, probably the day we started, we had probably a couple dozen vehicles on the road. I don't know exactly what the highest is.
And what's the highest?
I don't know.
Do you have an estimate?
In the thousands. I don't know more specifically than that.
Okay, but you don't know if it's 1,000 or 80,000?
I would say it's somewhere in between, but if I respectfully can suggest that
Okay.
the framework for looking at this is a little bit different than when you're looking at.
In other words, it's none of my business.
No, it's not that, sir. It's that The number of approved Lyft drivers is different because you have, first of all, the majority of Lyft drivers participate on a part-time basis. Around 80% of.
But you're supposed to do background checks on those drivers, aren't you?
We do.
And you're supposed to inspect their vehicles, aren't you?
We do.
So how many vehicles and drivers have you inspected?
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that that number can be a little bit misleading because someone can be inspected, can be approved, can pass the very rigorous background check and give one ride or give no rides. So other people will drive on average maybe 10 hours a week. As I was saying, and I believe the CPUC's findings back this up, that the vast majority of drivers who participate on the TNC platform drive 15 or 20 hours a week or less. So the overall number of vehicles or the overall number of drivers is a little bit of a misleading metric.
So I can assume that these numbers are misleading as well?
No.
Why not? Why are you so certain about these but not certain about the actual drivers that work for your company or the amount of cars that work for your company?
Because on any given day, the amount of drivers can change, the amount of active drivers can change. It is always in flux. It's the nature of the ride-sharing platform that on any given day, you can have a wide variety of drivers who are
But
participating.
how much can that change?
A lot. I just don't know the specific number.
Well, okay. But for me, that calls into question your stats if you can't measure how many people actually work for you. That's, I think, an important figure. Wouldn't you agree that's an important figure to know who your employees are?
Well, first of all, they're not our employees, but like I said, there's a wide variation in how many drivers participate on the platform, and it can vary.
Or your contractors? You don't know how many people you contract with?
The point, in order for a ride-sharing platform like Lyft to work, is to encourage as many people to participate as possible. We actually want to see everybody in California be either a passenger or a driver on the Lyft platform. We want to see everybody able to turn on their app as they go on their way to work and be able to pick up somebody who's also going in the same direction. So yes, we encourage high participation. The numbers are high. I will grant you that if that's the point you're trying to make. I just don't know the exact number.
Okay. Well, thank you. We'll move on to Kelly Blossom.